Most players think Ekko is all about mechanics and flashy outplays, but that's not what actually wins games on this champion. People lose on Ekko because they go in at the wrong time. This champion doesn't win because you press your abilities quickly. He wins because you know exactly when you're allowed to commit. One good engage lets you instantly delete a carry and escape before anyone can punish you. One bad engage gets you crowd controlled and killed before you can even use your ultimate. And if you don't understand the difference, you'll throw fights you should be carrying. So in this guide, I'm going to show you exactly how to play Ekko properly, from trading and combo setups, to builds, team fighting, and real in-game decision making. So no matter the fight, you know when to commit and when to take over. Let's get into it. Let's quickly lock in what Ekko brings to the table. He excels in short trades and explosive fights, quickly punishing squishy targets before disengaging with his ultimate. His W creates massive pick potential and can completely control fights when used around objectives, choke points, and flanks. Ekko's dash and passive movement speed let him weave around fights, chase targets, and escape dangerous situations. His ultimate and mobility give him endless opportunities to dodge abilities, bait cooldowns, and turn fights around. His wave clear lets him quickly leave lane and create pressure across the map through picks, flanks, and skirmishes. But that power comes with real risks, so let's break down his weaknesses. Ekko can be killed extremely quickly if he gets caught out or mistimes his engage during fights. A lot of his damage and crowd control relies on proper setup, prediction, and enemies walking into his W zones. Without his ultimate available, Ekko loses a huge amount of his safety, escape potential, and ability to play aggressively. Crowd control completely shuts down his mobility and can force him from using his ultimate before he gets burst down. Ranged champions can consistently pressure and poke Ekko in lane, making it hard for him to safely trade or roam early. Those are Ekko's biggest strengths and weaknesses overall. Ekko's passive might look simple at first, but this is the ability that defines his entire hit and run playstyle. After hitting an enemy with 3 separate attacks or abilities, you'll deal bonus damage and gain a burst of movement speed. A common mistake many Ekko players make is overcommitting after proccing their passive. But most of the time, your goal is to quickly trigger it, back off, then look for another opening once your cooldowns come back up. This passive is what makes Ekko's short trades so strong in lane. You can quickly proc it with abilities and an auto attack, burst the enemy, then use the movement speed to safely disengage before they can properly trade back. Your Q can hit twice, which makes proccing your passive much easier during trades and combos. Your passive also works on minions, letting you clear waves much faster once you have a few levels and some AP. The movement speed is just as important as the damage. Use it to chase down targets, dodge important skill shots or crowd control, and safely reposition during team fights. Most players think Ekko's Q is just a simple poke ability, but this is actually the tool that controls almost his entire kit. You throw a device forward that damages and slows enemies on the way out, then returns back to you dealing damage again. A common mistake many Ekko players make is only thinking about the first hit, but the return damage is just as important since hitting both parts instantly gives you 2 passive stacks. Once you land the slow, use your movement speed or dash to reposition and keep enemies inside the return path. This makes your trades far more consistent. Your Q is your main wave clear tool, letting you quickly push waves and create roam timers once you have a few levels and some AP. The slow from Q makes landing your passive, W, and even your ultimate much more reliable. During teamfights, your Q's AoE damage can hit multiple enemies at once, giving you massive value when targets are grouped together. This is one of the most loaded abilities in the game, and one perfect placement can completely turn a fight. You place down a zone that activates after a delay. If you enter the zone in time, you gain a shield. If enemies are still inside when it activates, they'll be slowed and then stunned. A common mistake is using this ability too late. Because of the delay, your W usually needs to be placed before fights start instead of during them. This ability becomes much easier to land when enemies can't see you, they're slowed, trapped in choke points, or forced to run in predictable directions while retreating. Even if the stun misses, the shield alone can still win trades and survive burst damage. It grants vision inside the zone, making it useful for scouting dangerous areas. Your W also has a passive effect, causing your attacks and abilities to deal bonus damage to low health enemies. Imagine having both a dash and a blink built into the same ability. That's what makes Ekko's E so powerful. You first dash a short distance, then your next auto attack becomes empowered with bonus damage and a blink onto the target. A common mistake is instantly using both parts while dashing directly at the enemy. But in many situations, it's better to dash at an angle first, dodge important abilities, then hold the second activation briefly so you can reposition or react to enemy movement before committing. Your E can jump over walls. Ekko can dash over one wall, then blink onto a target over another, giving him chase and escape angles most champions simply can't match. Ekko's E is what brings his entire kit together, letting you reposition for your Q, enter your W at the perfect moment, and initiate onto targets to trigger your passive. One perfect ultimate can completely take over a fight, but one moment of crowd control can stop you from using it at all. Ekko rewinds back to his previous position, healing himself and dealing massive AoE damage around where he lands. A common mistake is getting too greedy with this ability. Players wait too long trying to hit the perfect ultimate, then end up getting crowd controlled or killed before they can even use it. In many situations, it's better to use your ultimate early and survive instead of risking everything for maximum damage. Pay close attention to important crowd control before committing into fights. Once key abilities are used, that's usually your window to go in aggressively and safely set up your ultimate. And remember, your ultimate doesn't always need to deal damage to be valuable. Sometimes the best play is simply diving onto a squishy target, bursting them, and then using your R to safely escape before the enemy team can punish you. Max your Q first since it's your main trading, wave clear, and poke tool throughout the game. Max your E second since the lower cooldown and increased damage are extremely important. Max your W last since it's mostly used for utility and setup rather than raw damage. And of course, level your ultimate whenever available. If you want to play Ekko properly, this is the combo you need to master first. This is your main trading combo throughout the entire game, and you'll use it constantly in lane, skirmishes, and quick picks. Using Q during your dash cancels the animation, making the combo much smoother and harder to react to. E, Q, auto. But against mobile champions with blinks or dashes, they can sometimes react the moment they see your E. So instead of instantly buffering Q, wait until you land first, and then throw it after they commit their movement. You can also weave your W into this combo when engaging from fog or setting up longer trades. The scariest Ekko players don't stay in fights. They go in, burst you down, then disappear before you can even respond. You dash in with your main trade combo, proc your damage quickly, then use your ultimate to safely escape before the enemy can turn on you. The goal isn't to use your ultimate for damage. It's to go in aggressively, force a quick kill or trade, then completely reset your position before the enemy can punish you. This combo is perfect for quick picks, tower dives, and chaotic teamfights where staying too long gets you killed. E, Q auto, ultimate. If you have time to prepare first, you can also set up your W before engaging, especially for tower dives or risky fights where the shield helps you survive longer. If enemies ever walk into your setup, this combo can completely delete any squishy champion in the game. This is Ekko's highest burst combo, but it only works if enemies walk into your W or get caught inside your setup first. Once they're stunned, quickly chain your damage together while they can't escape. This combo is especially deadly from Fog of War, brushes, or flanks. W, Q, E, auto, ultimate. Most Ekko players flash first. The dangerous ones E first, then flash. If you flash first, enemies can see it coming and react before your dash connects. But with E flash, the combo becomes much faster, harder to react to, and much more consistent at finishing low health targets. It also lets your blink follow enemies more reliably if they flash away at the same time. A lot of players think they escaped, then Ekko suddenly appears right on top of them anyway. E flash auto. This is the type of setup that makes enemies wonder where the stun even came from. Most players throw W first and immediately warn the enemy what's about to happen. But by hiding the animation during your Q or E, you give enemies far less time to react before the stun lands. This makes your engage much more unpredictable. EW. QW. You can weave these hidden W setups into almost any of the previous combos. These are your core combos. Lock them in. Hail of Blades is your main rune. It works extremely well with your trades, letting you proc your passive quickly without relying on perfect skill shots. This is especially important against ranged champions, because if you don't proc your passive fast enough, you often lose too much health during trades. Electrocute is your stronger short trade burst option. It gives you better burst early if you're able to proc it consistently, but it's less forgiving than Hail of Blades. Dark Harvest is your scaling option. It becomes much stronger in games with constant skirmishes, low health targets, and reset heavy fights later on. But it can rely heavily on the meta. If you're unsure, Hail of Blades is usually the most consistent option. For secondary options, Sorcery is usually your best option. Absolute Focus and Scorch if you're after more damage, but Mana Flow Band is great if you find yourself early on. For shards, take Adaptive Force instead of attack speed. Doran's Ring is usually your safest and most consistent starting item. Dark Seal is much greedier, but extremely strong in easier lanes or snowball heavy games. Even if you don't start it, it can still be one of the best early recall purchases on Ekko. Lichbane is usually Ekko's strongest early spike. It gives him everything he wants: burst damage, movement speed, and much stronger damage during short trades and combos. Nash's Tooth becomes much stronger into tankier team comps or longer extended fights, where the extra sustained damage becomes far more valuable. Dusk and Dawn is another strong option. It gives you extra survivability through bonus health, while still maintaining strong burst during short trades and skirmishes. Against tankier comps, you can even build Nash's first, before transitioning into Dusk and Dawn second. Rocket Belt is another viable option against highly mobile champions. You lose some raw damage compared to the other spikes, but the active mobility gives you much more outplay potential and easier engages. Shadow Flame is almost always a strong follow-up item, regardless of your build path, giving Ekko a massive mid-game AP spike against squishier targets. If you start snowballing early, Mage Eyes can become incredibly strong on Ekko. His mobility, W pressure, and ultimate safety make it much easier for him to protect stacks compared to many other assassins. Rabadon's Death Cap becomes an enormous power spike once you're ahead and don't desperately need defensive items first. Sonya's is extremely important against heavy burst or dangerous engage threats, while Banshees becomes incredibly valuable against threatening AP or crowd control champions. For magic penetration, Kriploon is usually stronger than Void Staff in most games. The ability haste and healing passive work extremely well with Ekko's skirmish heavy playstyle and often provide far more value overall. Sorcerer's Shoes will usually be your strongest default option in most games. Mercury Treads become extremely important against heavy crowd control comps, because even one extra second of CC can be the difference between getting your ultimate off or dying instantly. Flash is mandatory on Ekko, gives you stronger engages, escape potential, outplay opportunities, and much more combo flexibility overall. Ignite is usually your strongest secondary option, giving you much more kill pressure during lane and early skirmishes. Teleport is still viable into extremely difficult lanes or slower scaling games, where surviving lane and maintaining tempo around the map matters more than early solo kill pressure. Ekko usually wants to survive the first few levels cleanly while slowly building control over the lane. Your early game is less about mindlessly forcing fights and more about farming consistently, managing waves properly, and waiting for stronger trading windows to appear. One of the easiest ways to gain pressure early is simply pushing the enemies under tower. When opponents are stuck last hitting, they have much less freedom to harass you, contest trades, or move around the map without losing CS. And against some immobile ranged champions, you can even start aggressively at level 1 with E by dashing forward, proccing your passive quickly, and backing out before enemies can fully trade back. Ekko also has a very strong level 2 all-in. You can throw your Q through the wave, last hit a minion at the same time, instantly level E, then dash forward before enemies can react. Once you unlock level 6, your map pressure becomes much more dangerous. After pushing waves, constantly look around the map for opportunities. Low health enemies, extended side lanes, river skirmishes, or teammates setting up crowd control can all create strong roam windows. And one of the strongest things you can do on Ekko is simply disappearing from vision. Sometimes hovering in fog of war, controlling brushes, or staying out of sight for a few seconds creates pressure by itself, especially because your W becomes far more threatening when enemies lose track of you. Once you reach 1 to 2 items, Ekko becomes extremely threatening around the map. This is where you want to start aggressively looking for picks, low health enemies, or squishy champions caught out alone. It's also one of the best times to swap to sweeper and start denying vision aggressively. A huge amount of Ekko's pressure comes from uncertainty. The less information enemies have, the more dangerous your engages become. Control wards, brushes, fog of war, and hidden W setups become massive tools for creating picks and forcing mistakes. Skirmishes are also where Ekko shines. Dragon fights, herald fights, and small jungle skirmishes give you much more space to weave in and out of combat, find openings, and pressure backline champions. You can still side lane when needed, especially because Ekko clears waves quickly and destroys towers very fast with items like Lichbane and Nash's Tooth. But usually you'll want to push waves out, collect farms safely, then rotate back towards fights or pressure the map again. You're not trying to permanently split push, you want to stay active and constantly look for opportunities around the map. Teamfighting on Ekko is all about timing, patience, and controlled aggression. You'll usually want to look for squishy targets first, burst them quickly, then reposition before enemies fully collapse onto you. Ekko performs best when constantly moving in and out of fights, playing around cooldowns, and using his mobility to avoid getting locked down. Don't get greedy holding your ultimate for too long. It's much better to use it early and survive, than die while trying to save it for the perfect moment. Because even after using your ultimate, Ekko can still reposition, continue fighting, and create pressure with the rest of his kit. As fights become chaotic, look for opportunities to land your ultimate onto multiple enemies, burst targets quickly, then back out again before enemies can punish you. And if your team starts the fight first, that often creates the perfect opening for Ekko to follow up once enemy cooldowns start getting used. Late game, Ekko's damage becomes extremely dangerous. You can burst squishy champions extremely fast and heavily punish enemies caught out of position. Most of the same rules still apply. Stay patient, control vision, and avoid forcing reckless engages too early. But the biggest danger late game is usually crowd control. If you get locked down before using your ultimate, you can disappear instantly. So stay patient, watch enemy cooldowns carefully, and once fights become chaotic, look for the right moment to collapse onto your priority targets. A lot of players underestimate how important Ekko's passive really is. This is what wins your trades. It gives you a burst of damage, movement speed to get out safely, and controls the entire tempo of your lane phase. A common mistake is trading while your passive is still on cooldown, because once it's gone, your short trades become much weaker and much riskier. Most of the time, you want to wait for your passive to come back before looking for your next trade again. A quick auto reset also helps proc your passive slightly faster. Most players think Ekko can only proc his passive once in a fight, but every champion has their own separate passive cooldown. So in teamfights and skirmishes, if you proc your passive on one target, you can immediately proc it again on someone else. This gives you repeated bursts of movement speed and damage throughout the fight. This is what makes a good Ekko feel so fast, slippery, and frustrating to deal with in teamfights. One small flash trick can completely change where Ekko's Q comes from and where it returns. If you ever see a low health enemy at range and need to finish them quickly, don't flash then Q. This is too slow and too easy to react to. Instead, pre-buffer your Q, then instantly flash during the animation to make sure the Q comes out almost immediately from the new position. This will catch most enemies by surprise. You can even use flash after throwing your Q to suddenly redirect the return path at the last second. A lot of players focus on the initial throw, so when the return angle suddenly changes, it can unexpectedly hit enemies trying to sidestep or escape. Both of these tricks are extremely powerful, but since they cost flash, save them for important kills or game-changing moments. One of Ekko's strongest hidden mechanics is being able to stun enemies from outside his own W. Most players know that passing through the W with your ultimate can trigger the stun. But what many players don't realize is that you don't always have to fully pass through it either. As long as your ultimate lands close enough to the edge of your W, it can still activate the stun and completely catch enemies off guard. This makes Ekko's W and R combo much more dangerous and unpredictable than most players expect. Some players think one wall is enough to escape Ekko. Sometimes even 2 walls isn't enough. You can dash over one wall, then use the blink on a target over a second wall to instantly follow them. While chasing, this usually means blinking onto the enemy directly. But while escaping, jungle cams become extremely useful targets for creating massive distance and escaping fights that normally shouldn't be survivable. Some walls look impossible for Ekko to cross, but they're not. Just because the range indicator doesn't fully reach over a wall doesn't always mean your E can't cross it either. A lot of medium-sized walls are actually very consistent once you practice the positioning, but there are some extremely thick walls Ekko can cross with near perfect positioning and timing. This also works with the blink portion of your E. So if there's a target on the other side of a thick wall, whether it's a champion, minion, or jungle cam, always keep that in mind as a potential escape or escape path. Some of these thicker walls aren't reliable to force every game, but in emergency situations, they can be the difference between escaping or dying. Flashing away from Ekko doesn't always create distance. Sometimes it does the exact opposite. There's a very small delay before the blink portion of your E connects to a target. So if an enemy dashes, flashes, or uses movement during that window, Ekko will often follow right on top of them. This makes Ekko extremely dangerous against champions trying to escape at the last second. You can even anticipate movement abilities near walls. If you know an enemy is about to dash or flash over terrain, hold your E blink until the very last possible moment, and you may just follow them straight over the wall. Most players force Ekko's ultimate for damage. Good Ekko players use it for everything else. Because enemies can see your shadow, forcing the damage is often unreliable against good players. Instead, use your ultimate to escape and juke enemies chasing you. A lot of players will fully commit thinking they've caught you, only for you to suddenly disappear and end up far away from them. In fights, you can also use your ultimate early for massive heal instead of greedily holding it for damage. This can completely swing extended trades and leave you with far more health than the enemy in laning phase. You can also use your ultimate as a gap closer. Enemies often relax once they see you walk away from your shadow, only for you to suddenly ult forward and jump straight back on top of them. Rocket Belt is mostly bought for mobility, not raw damage. But when you do get a chance to fully burst someone, this is how you squeeze the most out of it. Q into Rocket Belt is your quick, long-range finisher. EQ Rocket Belt Auto gives you fast burst while staying glued to the target. And Auto Rocket Belt Auto cancels your auto animation, letting you stack passive extremely quickly in short trades or skirmishes. Sometimes the strongest part of Ekko's ultimate is hiding the fact that you even have it. One small trick you can use at level 6 is delaying your ultimate skill point until you actually need it. Normally, enemies can see your shadow following behind you, which reveals exactly where your ultimate will return. But if you haven't leveled your ultimate yet, your shadow won't appear at all. This lets you suddenly level your R mid-fight, making your burst much harder to predict. Now, experienced players may know this trick exists, but without seeing your shadow, they still won't know where your ultimate is going to land. Ekko's W becomes far more dangerous when enemies don't see it coming. A lot of players throw W directly in front of enemies and immediately give away the setup. Instead, use fog of war, brushes, walls, and out of vision angles to hide the animation whenever possible. For example, throw W while returning to lane. This makes it much harder for enemies to react early or reposition before the stun lands. The less information enemies have about your W, the more pressure and control you create. Don't just throw Ekko's W randomly and hope enemies walk into it. Stack the odds in your favor. Wait until enemies are chasing or retreating. Their movement becomes far more predictable, especially in choke points where they only have limited escape paths. You can even throw your W over walls enemies are likely to dash or flash across. Use your Q slow to make landing W much easier. Wait for allied crowd control first. A rooted or stunned target gives you much more reliable setup. And when enemies are grouped together, you don't need the perfect stun. You usually only need to catch one target for the fight to become dangerous. Ekko's W can be the difference between escaping or dying. Don't force risky stuns every time. Against ranged champions, the shield alone can help you safely wave clear and survive lane pressure. Don't force yourself to stay inside the W just to land the stun while escaping. Sometimes the slow alone is enough to safely get away. And W is great for safely checking dangerous areas like brushes, jungle entrances, or Baron and Dragon pits without fully committing. The better you get at using W defensively, the harder Ekko becomes to kill. A lot of enemies stop watching Ekko and start reacting to the W instead. You can use this against them by throwing your W one direction, then suddenly change your movement path completely for unexpected jukes, baits, and escapes. And sometimes the W doesn't even need to land at all. Just showing the W animation is often enough to make enemies panic, back away, or completely give up space around objectives and choke points. The best Ekko players don't just use W for stuns, they use it to control how enemies think, move, and react before the fight even starts. One of Ekko's sneakiest tricks is being able to fully reset, then suddenly reappear back into the fight. You can recall, heal, buy items, then instantly ult back to your shadow before enemies have time to react. This creates unexpected re-engages with full health, fresh items, and cooldowns enemies often aren't prepared for. And most players don't even realize this is possible, but Ekko can temporarily have 2 Qs active at once. If you throw your Q in fountain before ulting back, you can have 2 Qs active at the same time for a surprising burst of damage. The moment Ekko disappears into a brush, the fight becomes dangerous. Brushes are one of Ekko's strongest tools. Your W becomes much harder to see coming, and once enemies lose vision of you, they can no longer track your shadow either. This creates terrifying setups where enemies can suddenly walk into your W, your ultimate, or a full re-engage without realizing how much danger they're actually in. The best Ekko players constantly use brushes to create uncertainty, pressure, and panic before the fight even starts. Before we get into specific matchups, understand that Ekko isn't usually trying to hard force random fights at level 1. Most lanes are about surviving the early levels cleanly, collecting farms safely, and waiting for your real power spikes to come online. Once you unlock level 3, you gain much more control over trades, wave pressure, and aggressive setups. If enemies waste important cooldowns or miss position, walk too far forward, or get chunked low, that's when Ekko can certainly turn extremely dangerous. You also become much stronger once you start pushing waves into tower, because it gives you more freedom to roam, control vision, and threaten fights from unexpected angles. Then after your first completed item, whether it's Lichbane, Nash's Tooth, or another major spike, your burst damage and pick potential increases massively. In easier matchups, you usually have much more freedom to scale safely, control waves, and pressure trades once enemies waste cooldowns. Many of these champions struggle to deal with your mobility consistently, which gives you more opportunities to poke, push waves, roam, and eventually snowball fights. You can often start playing much more aggressively once you unlock level 3, especially if you gain push priority first. You still don't want to blindly force bad fights early, but these lanes usually give you far more room to pressure mistakes and control the pace of the lane. Medium matchups are usually skill based and depend heavily on spacing, cooldown tracking, wave control, and patience. These champions can punish mistakes hard if you misplay your movement or waste abilities, but they also give Ekko opportunities to outplay through timing, mobility, and smart trading patterns. In many of these lanes, small mistakes decide everything. One missed ability, bad trade, or poorly timed engage can completely change the lane. Focus on surviving the early levels cleanly, tracking important cooldowns, and looking for smart level 3 and then level 6 windows to fight back. Hard matchups are the lanes where Ekko has much less room for error. These champions usually have stronger early pressure, better range control, reliable crowd control, or tools that make it difficult for Ekko to safely engage or farm. In these lanes, your goal usually isn't to dominate early. It's to survive cleanly, avoid falling behind, and wait for better opportunities later on. You'll often need to rely more on wave management, short trades, roams, fog of war, and create angles instead of straightforward all-ins. Patience matters even more here, because forcing bad fights early usually gets punished immediately. Once you reach your core spikes, teamfights and skirmishes usually become much easier than the actual lane phase itself. Don't stress if some lanes feel difficult early on. Ekko doesn't need to instantly win lane to take over games. As long as you're farming consistently, avoiding unnecessary deaths, and recognizing the right moments to become aggressive, you're already playing the champion correctly. And if you want more detailed help against specific champions, check out my complete mid lane matchup guide, where I break down how to lane against every major mid matchup. Ekko is just as strong in the jungle as he is mid, and for many players it's actually their preferred role. Now this isn't going to turn into a full jungle guide, but I do want to cover the core fundamentals you actually need. How to clear efficiently, path correctly, find better ganks, and consistently snowball games on Ekko jungle. He has fast, healthy clearing, strong mobility for ganks, solid dueling once you understand your damage windows, and excellent snowball potential once you get ahead. For your clearing, the biggest thing is to make sure you constantly hit both parts of your Q. A lot of Ekko's jungle speed comes from maximizing the return damage while constantly moving between camps. You also don't need to auto attack on every small monster. A lot of the time the Q return will finish them off naturally, which lets you start moving earlier and keep your clear flowing smoothly. You also want to start preparing your W before reaching the next camp whenever possible. The stun and shield help you clear safely. Use your E over walls whenever you can to save time, and remember that your E gives you an auto reset, so a quick auto E auto helps add damage slightly faster during clears. You generally want to kite camps towards your next camp or towards the lane you plan to gank. And once you become more comfortable on Ekko, you want to start overlapping camps together. This means beginning your next camp while finishing off the current one. A great example of this is using your Q to finish one camp, while the return Q hits the next camp you're already starting. As for the starting route, there are two simple options. Starting blue buff is usually the safer and more farm heavy opener. It gives you a smoother early full clear, helping you reach level 4 quickly, and lets you keep your red buff active slightly longer for later skirmishes or ganks. You're usually not forcing early play here. Instead, you're focusing more on efficient clearing, hovering lanes, and being ready for counter ganks if opportunities appear. Starting red buff is the more flexible and balanced option. You can still full clear if nothing happens, but you also have more freedom to pressure lanes earlier depending on the matchup and wave state. This route gives you more options if you want to adapt your pathing and look for faster early impact. For your runes, Hail of Blades is still completely viable in the jungle, especially if you want stronger early ganks and faster burst damage. However, Dark Harvest is generally the more consistent scaling option overall, especially for mid to late game teamfights and resets. Just remember that jungle games can become very chaotic, so late game isn't always guaranteed. One of the biggest jungle differences is your first item option. Unlike mid lane, you generally don't want to rush Lichbane on jungle Ekko. Instead, Nash's Tooth is usually the stronger option if you want faster clears, higher tempo, and more consistent damage throughout the game. You can also go Dusk and Dawn if you want a slightly tankier and safer setup that fits into more situations overall. For your jungle pet, Red Smite is generally better when you expect more direct fights and dueling against the enemy jungler or lower mobility champions. Blue Smite is better against high mobile or ranged champions since the extra movement speed helps you stick onto targets and reposition more easily during fights and ganks. As for general gameplay, constant map awareness is one of the biggest things that separates good junglers from average ones. While clearing camps, you should constantly be checking lanes, wave states, and where the enemy jungler could be pathing. Even if you can't force a gank, you can still punish the enemy jungler by taking camps, securing objectives, or counter ganking when fights break out. Ekko is especially strong at counter ganking because enemies often walk directly into your W while chasing aggressively. For your ganks, try to place your W about a second before fully appearing. You want enemies to have as little time as possible to react before the zone activates. And get creative with your angles. Ekko can gank from unexpected positions using walls, fog of war, and your E-mobility to bypass common ward locations and surprise enemies. Once you start snowballing, Ekko becomes extremely strong at diving squishy targets. Your passive movement speed, W shield, stun setup, E gap close, and eventually your ultimate make tower dives much safer than most players expect. And finally, make sure to swap to sweepers whenever you feel ready to start controlling vision more aggressively. Vision denial is incredibly powerful in Ekko because the less enemies have to react to you, the stronger your engages become. Ekko is one of those champions where the more comfortable you become with his timing, movement, and damage windows, the stronger he starts to feel. The more games you put into Ekko, the more natural his combos, engages, and decision making become. If this guide helped, consider subscribing for more champion guides like this. I'm Zeus, and I'll see you in the next one.